This is very much. Dr. Scissors, would you say that in 2019, the U.S.
in Texas, okay, having stable demand for domestic suppliers is a good way to do that. And that might, in this case, it would make a lot of sense to purchase for a stockpile.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative. Chair recognizes Representative User for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you to our witnesses very much. Dr. Scissors, would you say that in 2019, the U.S. economy on a comparative basis to the rest of the world that we traded with was doing well?
Wow, put me on the spot there, sir. I would say yes, it was, but I also see the seeds for problem because we were borrowing too much money. That's my own personal opinion on how to judge success.
Fair. Our deficit did increase that year by $520 billion. Of course, over the last couple of years, we've had COVID, but I mean we're up 6 trillion, I believe it is. So little bit more. In 2018. Our GDP was 20 trillion. Our China trade deficit was 419. In 19, our GDP was 21. Our China trade deficit was 319. In 2020, the year of COVID, we went down to 19 trillion in GDP, 310 China trade deficit. And in 21, we had an absolutely booming year, 23 trillion with 344 trade deficit. So what's interesting there is that the size of the increase, $4 trillion, nearly 20%, but also the fact that we are thinking that we're buying everything necessarily from China, and it went up relatively proportionally. Of course, you got inflation in that GDP number and a tremendous amount of government spending. So we know where we are with outcomes. You know, I was in the real world in business for 25 years, and there you focus on outcomes, not intentions. So you know what we have right here is we have enormous demand in certain sectors. I'm not telling anybody anything they don't know. Consumer spending is very high. We have incredible workforce shortages in rural areas and throughout cities. It exists. So all you got to do is take a walk with me down Main Street, and you'll hear every single business tell you that. Now, in China, they had their shutdowns as well, and that's primarily the reason that we got so many cargo ships offshore. But our domestic production clearly was dramatically reduced, from furniture to bacon. And, that's why we have the type of inflation we haven't seen since 1982. So why would you think that this administration would think it's a good idea? Because to me, it's the worst time to increase government spending. And this is for Mr. Shi as well, and perhaps the other witness. I mean, worst time to increase taxes, worst time to put down certain mandates on employment availability, all right, without doing it in a smart way, particularly without doing any stockpiling of testing. Here you have this huge test mandate, and you discuss it anyway, it gets proven unconstitutional, and then you don't even bother worrying about the supply. So my question to you is, do you think the continued idea to continue to spend and increase taxes is the right way to go in this sort of environment?
No, I definitely don't. I understand why people have a response to a crisis that they think in the short term, what do we need to do right now? This is urgent. I get that, and we can have an argument over short-term policy. But on long-term policy, I think we're in complete agreement, sir. I would say, as somebody who thinks about U.S. economic competition versus China, you don't want to win the debt race. You don't want to be first in debt. As we have discussed repeatedly in this hearing, you do want to be first in innovation. Innovation does not solve all your problems, But if you want to win an economic competition, you want to be healthy economically, you need to innovate. And finally,
and
as you mentioned, we need to train our workers. That's, we have a lot of people, there's thoughts that like people don't want to work anymore. Let's give them the skill level to get a job that they like better than the one they have or the one they don't want to apply to. So
I agree. It's hard with a $50,000 annual cost for college, 50,000 plus. And I'd love to get the witnesses' thoughts on the CHIPS Act, because I certainly believe it's imperative, important, and necessary. So maybe we could get that in a follow-up. I yield back, Mr. Chairman. I understand my time's run out.
Thank you, Representative. Chair recognizes Representative Tenney for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member.